Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Chris Jackson, and Fred was just telling me how confident he is in being confident.
Yeah, I wasn't. That was your idea. So I'm not really sure where you're going with this, but I have an idea. My first response, of course, was the flippant one was, well, we'll just look it up. You know, I can do that right on my screen.
That's right. And it's not a bad way to go, because we can sometimes get too wrapped up in a overly technical or statistical interpretation of confidence.
Well, it's definitely not statistical. It's the feeling or belief that one can rely on someone or something, firm trust.
Right. And that's not a bad description of what confidence is.
Yeah. No, I'm confident that when we set up a time to record that you're right there, right on time.
And I'm getting more confident that I am there as well.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. But it's a soft, fuzzy, squishy deal. You know, it's not what we use in statistics at all. And like but I've had a manager ask me, so how confident are you that, you know, the reliability is good? And I intuit that they don't want to know that I'm at 98% confident that the sample we taken is going to represent the population. That's not what they're asking. They're asking, are you sure?
Yeah. And it's not an unreasonable question to ask. Mm-hmm. And then reliability engineers can get themselves into trouble where they start quoting statistics and chi-squared this and producers risk that. But I think what we're getting at is confidence in decision-making as it relates to design or manufacture of something, especially when it comes to reliability. There's a lot of literature and academic work on coming up with test plans that generate confidence that your device meets a requirement, for example. Mm-hmm. And that's a very statistical interpretation. So if we'll use our good friend, the chi-squared distribution. If you're interested in understanding that the MTBF exceeds a requirement by a certain confidence, then you can go away and work out a test that's with a certain number of allowable failures and a total duration that allows you to, at least at the surface level, get confidence that your thing meets that requirement. And that's and a lot of textbooks will flat out say, you just need to do this test with this number of allowable failures over this duration or time, and you will be confident with a certain level. Yeah,
success testing with the binomial distribution is you can be 90% confident that you've achieved at least 90% reliability, yada, yada, yada. Right. And okay, with 22 samples. It's the one formula I actually remember by heart.
Right.
But
so that's, yeah, but I mean, if you go back to the MTBF testing, for example, you and I both know there's tons of assumptions under that, the statistical.
Oh, yeah, and if that's your requirement and you know you got this horrible wear-out mechanism that happens in 6 hours, make sure each sample only runs for 5 hours until you get to the total duration you need. And you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
You know, it's fine.
How most electronic components are tested.
Yeah.
And that's for that reason, people take the advertised hazard rate or failures in times fits for components, electronic components, with a substantial grain of salt, because they don't have confidence that the number quoted by the OEM is actually going to help them work out how long it's going to be before that capacitor is likely going to fail. Even though those fit rates are actually the product of a standardized test.
Right. Hence my rants. I'm really trying to hold my breath here, temper a bit, but and it's making progress. There's no doubt about it, because we can have this kind of discussion and go, as most people know, is that fit rate that's provided it might be out of a 25-year-old handbook. It might be the result of testing 6,000 samples for 20 seconds each and say, hey, look, they're good. Or my favorite one is we've shipped millions of them and we've only got 3 back.
Yep.
Okay, what's that mean? It's you're selling a fraction of a cent component. It's 100 times more expensive to put it in a box and send it to you. Why bother? Exactly. And you're not going to do anything once you get it. So,
well, and I think it brings us to a pretty useful junction. There's 2 different types of confidence, at least the way I see it. I think there's a confidence you get through good procedures, good practices, knowing that all your design efforts are meaningful, understanding when it comes to reliability, understanding every step of the way what your vital few, your significant reliability issues with your design or process are, and consistently going through coming up with corrective actions or fixes to eliminate the root cause of that particular concern. And if you do this iteratively, if you start your design process with with a fault tree analysis or FMEA, or just going through field data from the previous model, and you say, okay, here are our big ticket items. Design that problem out of the system, design that problem out of the system, and keep going. You get a lot of confidence that the end result is really, really good. And there's plenty of organisations that you and I both know who rely exclusively on trying to find those vital few, fixing those vital few, and then moving on. And that's the only way they generate confidence that their system is going to be reliable. A good example is Netflix. They don't measure the reliability of their system. They are incredibly reliable in terms of being available for customers, but they essentially try to deliberately break their system on an hourly basis, see how the system responds, and fix the issue associated with potential failure.
And not waiting for it to actually happen.
Right. And that reason, they without ever doing a single measuring or quantitative test, they have that really good version of confidence where they just know. You just know.
Yeah. Well, one of the teams I worked with years ago and I've talked about them before, is they made these handheld barcode readers used by baggage handlers at airports. So they would scan the bag going on the plane and scan the bag coming off the plane. And they knew that these things would be dropped onto the tarmac. Although it's not tar, I think it's concrete in most cases these days. I don't know where the word tarmac comes from. I might have to look that one up. But anyway, they knew it would be dropped. So they went to a standard. So handheld device, dropped onto concrete, drop it 10 times at random orientations, and another standard had them do it, once on each face and twice on a corner, and they passed those tests. They designed it, it passed, and went out in a beta to a local airport. They all back in the end of the week shattered. And they went, don't have a lot of confidence, trust, belief that it's true or useful, that standard test did us any good. So let's do something different. And so that's where this guy was brilliant. He said, well, let's just double the height and let's see if we can design to that. And they shipped that next prototype out to the airport. These guys did their normal thing with it, and it lasted a month. He says, well, that's an improvement. Is there a correlation here? And so I think the last I talked to him, they were like at 22 feet, 100 drops. And they would continue to design as long as it created a reduction in failures in the field. And they built a lot of confidence that even though this test was outrageous beyond the standards, it was meaningful for their application.
Right, and that's the most useful form of confidence, where they're actually informing a design process. That's real confidence.
Yep.
The other sort of confidence is stuff we do to personally feel good about it, maybe to defend ourselves.
Oh, but you derive the formulas and show that at the front of your report. So by the time you get to the results, everybody's glazed over, eyes are rolling back in their heads, and they think you're a math whiz, but they don't have any idea what you're telling them.
And that's where, you have those largely governmental customers who insist on demonstration testing, where they pull those equations from textbooks make those assumptions and say, well, this is the gold standard for generating confidence.
Mm-hmm.
You go, well,
it's
not
really.
quite.
No.
This is a pre-production prototype. So even if this meets the reliability requirements, now you're about to go into full rate production afterwards. And have you invested any time or money into getting ahead of the curve in terms of manufacturing? I'll look at the JLTV, which did in publicly released documentation. JLTV is a Joint Light Tactical Vehicle for the US Department of Defense. The winning design exceeded the reliability requirement by about 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
Very reliable. Now they've gone into full rate manufacturing. It's very unreliable.
They can't even get them to the train to ship them.
And so there's something going on, and has the design changed? Well, clearly not. So what has changed? It's just that instead of those prototypes being potentially right, the full rate production, it just wasn't something that was seriously thought of. So all that confidence that we got, or the DoD got from that JLTV passing that demonstration test, is completely misplaced because they're only testing one part of the reliability puzzle in a very controlled environment, which might not be representative of how it's going to be manufactured or used thereafter.
Yeah, no, some of the statistical notion we get forced into it in the development process. Like when I was working with inkjet printers, they would typically we'd build for the whole summer, and then it would be launched and it'd be in every store. So you'd create millions of these devices, and a lot of consumer products are like this, that are distributed in warehouses and ready to ship before anybody even gets one of them, right? So the risk of, if you have a major design flaw or production flaw and it affects, say, 10% or more of your products, you find out in the first week once they start launching. And that's a disaster. It's very expensive. So we rely on statistics because we're not going to test millions of units to say, well, what are the vital few areas of highest risk? How do we evaluate those so that we can understand what our true risks are? What's the probability of failure with these products? And that takes some work. But it's back to your point of, if you do the right things, the right process, and focus on those vital few and the areas of most interest, but it relies on, especially when you have that much risk. We made the argument that every single anomaly, not failure, but just something wasn't quite right. If somebody somewhere in the software group had to reboot their system twice before it came alive so they could do their work on it, that's got to be reported. Because we only have a couple hundred prototypes, and our chances of catching everything that's going to be in the millions of units shipped eventually is very low. So we can't ignore anything. And so the program director thought, yep, that makes sense. Everything gets reported. And then we got what we wished for, and we had thousands of reports of anomalies and problems and failures, and then it was triage and try to sort it out, because they didn't give us any more resources or time or anything else. We still shipped in 6 months. So you do the best you can. Yet it was different than just going, oh, get a couple of units, run them, fix them, and we'll be good. No, it's not going to be representative of lots and lots of units in production.
And when I'm teaching my courses or speaking to whoever I'm talking to about this sort of stuff, I try and make the point that all these wonderful things you're implementing as corrective actions or fixes to a mature design right now, if you had thought of them before your first design, they're essentially free.
Mm-hmm.
And many of my examples include just securing a wire so that it's not flapping around, or replacing solder joints with connectors, or really simple stuff like that. If you incorporate that into your first design, it's essentially free. And so what you want to do is, you don't want to have there's a lot of this sort of business case mentality. I mean, before I'm going to invest money in this, you need a business case that having this clip that secures this wire is going to be good return on investment. And the point is that if you think of it early enough, the investment's negligible. and the return is difficult to forensically link to a single design change. It's somewhat speculative, but that's the point. If you can think of as many of these issues as possible as part of your first design, then what that means is that you have a huge raft of these corrective actions or fixes or design characteristics or bright ideas which are borderline free if they're part of your first design, and they're going to cover a larger cross section of potential future failures. That's robust design.
Yeah. Well, you've seen there's a set of charts that show design changes across the product lifecycle timeline, and basically development up to launch. And it's just a count, like a PDF of I don't think it's PDF's the right term for it, but a histogram. Each week you count how many design changes were made. And the typical product lifecycle in most of the teams I've dealt with is there's usually a very small team at the concept phase, and then they get it into the next group and they want to get a prototype pretty quick. So they're under an intense timeline and they get something kind of working and they iterate. And then now now we're getting ready to launch. We have this big conference we got to go to. We got this and everything. And then design change after design change. And finally, the quality reliability folks get a handful of components and they go, oh, this is wrong, this ain't working, that's wrong. Finally give them. And it's just a huge spike of design changes right before launch. You lock it all down, you hand it to manufacturing. They find a bunch of stuff. The customers find a bunch of stuff. So you have a second peak of design changes in the first 3, 4, 5 months of your product's life, from manufacturing through installs. As opposed to what you're talking about, spend the extra week up front with a robust team, do the FMEA, think this stuff through, work out how you're going to implement all these features you're trying to do. Don't shoot the guy, but lock the door on the marketing team when they come in the 2 weeks before launch and saying, hey, we want these 6 more features. Stop that. Right. But do all your design changes in the first half of your product lifecycle and then refine and only do essential ones until you launch. And then and I wish I could find the paper that shows this. Somebody studied it. And it showed these graphics of if you change the focus to what you're just talking about, Chris, mm-hmm. It, 1, improves the ability to launch on time. 2, reduces the field failure rate significantly, improves customer satisfaction, all these other things. And many, many teams understand that, yet don't invest in it.
Absolutely. It's
I never got that where you're just speechless like that. Is that too much of a rant for you?
No. It's an enduring problem because it's a mindset change, especially that initial conversation. I also craze it like this when I'm talking to people. I mean, engineers or technically minded people or designers or manufacturers, we are tigers when it comes to problem solving.
Right.
That's why we get into the business.
Yep.
Designing a manufacturing process for a paper-based product. An engineer who goes into that field has been born a problem solver. They're the kids who are pulling apart stuff and building forwards and just trying to solve problems as they see it from day mm-hmm. one. And the hardest thing for engineers to do is to stop solving the problem as they see it, to better understand the problem that they need to solve.
Oh, you see that with the FMEA. You get 5 engineers in the room and you go, so how could it possibly fail? Let's start with the first feature. And then they say, oh, it won't turn on. And then they immediately dive into this whiteboard and they have 6 different solutions for why it doesn't turn on. Mm-hmm. And it's your very first brainstorm item that they can, wait. We got 1,000 more to consider here first. Oh, okay.
Yep. But getting people into that FMEA group in the first place is seen as
it's getting in the way of developing the product.
Right.
I mean, that's the mindset I see all the time. Yeah.
yeah, and the I use caricatures for the enemies of reliability. Those my three ones that you see in organisations. One of them, the infant manager, whose favourite phrase is WTF, which stands for the wrong thing fast. You have those managers and bosses who are just hell bent on getting the wrong thing fast.
Wasn't there a book out there on that? Fail fast, fail forward, something like that.
Well, that's a different connotation.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but you have these warped senses of progress and milestone achievement and program management where they just want to have something done to either maximize their bonus or otherwise feel good about them being good at what they do.
It's their confidence. We made the milestone. We pulled it all out, and then I get promoted. I move off. I got my resume and I'm out of here, and nothing works in the next week.
Well, I'll go one step further. I think that those sorts of people are people who don't. We're all a product of our history. So if you're a manager or a boss or a leader, if you've got no engineering experience, you don't have any engineering experience to generate confidence. So what do you invariably fall back upon?
Timeline, budget,
bureaucracy. Reliability tests that come out of a textbook. That happens so often. And I think the organisation that's worse for it, we bag on the military a lot, and we're ex-military, so we're allowed to.
We can, yeah.
Yeah. It's where you have officers who are pilots or tank battalion commanders or surface warfare officers who are going up that career path, and for whatever reason, they get pushed sideways into acquisition or engineering. And now they're a program manager for essentially an engineering effort. And they, because they're a human being, they need to generate confidence that their program is on track or going in the right direction. But if you don't have an engineering background, if you don't fundamentally get it, you don't have the ability to generate confidence that familiar or that fault tree analysis or that activity where we sit down and go through field data, or setting up a collaborative environment where our engineers are, lo and behold, allowed to talk to their engineers, that doesn't give them confidence. Yeah. What gives confidence is crashing through milestones as quickly as possible, passing tests that are dropped out of standards and textbooks. And as a rule, I think most military organisations are none for 3,455,000 when it comes to delivering military equipment on time and on budget.
Yeah, well, you can be pretty confident that's going to happen. Now, to be fair, there are folks that recognize that, hey, this isn't my expertise. Yet they have that chief technical officer, or they have that key engineer, or they have somebody, the group of people they put around them that they place their trust in, and they build their confidence on the head nods from those people. And so you can build trust other way, or build confidence other ways. Yet it does rely on that you have to understand that somebody else is the expert in this, or somebody else knows the nuances of this. And that the trouble is it takes a couple of cycles for them to go, okay, yep, what Bill said was right. And, when Sarah said this was going to work, and it did. And I can believe that now. I can trust that. I have confidence in their opinions. That's one way I've seen it done, where some leaders go, I'm a history major, but I surround myself with really smart people that I trust. And I create a confidence in my decisions based on input from those people. And,
right.
And so that's a way to go about doing it, not open up the mill standard 40 blah, 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 and run test number 87. It's just not going to work that way.
And I've seen that thing you're talking about too, but I think it's rare. It's rare. It's rarer than we'd like to believe, because the flip side is you can have that history major surround him or herself by subject matter experts in whatever field, but then they become the talismans of failure for each respective environment. So what I mean by that is you can have a reliability guy in your program, but then it's his fault every time that prototype fails.
Well, that won't survive, because the people that get thrown under the bus are not they're going to be super cautious or not tell you anything after.
Correct.
That, so that you don't get anything. No, you got to shield your your advisors if you're going to put your trust in them. If you're the one making the decision, it's your decision. That's the way I grew up in the military. But there's so many that don't want to delegate or open the advice and listen to it, or they feel ignorant if they can't understand what questions to ask. There are cases where that the belief part, I call it trust, elements of confidence can be established, but it's not statistics.
No. Statistics has a role.
Oh yeah.
You and I both advocate that, but the issue is that statistics is not the one and only and perhaps best way of getting confidence. I mean, you can use statistics, for example, if you worked out that the weakest point of your system is this rubber's seal, for example, and you're trying to work out how long you're trying to check between different potential rubber materials or rubber types of rubber to seal the housing of your very precious device. You can do, for example, accelerated live testing off a bunch of samples from vendors or suppliers and use statistics to very quickly, in a very short period of time, work out which one's likely going to last the longest in your particular environment. But that's targeted. That is, hey, we've actually gone through the process of working out what the weakest point of our system is. We actually know, in essence, the failure mechanism, which you need to know to do accelerated live testing.
Yep.
And then you target testing in a very surgical way. And of course, because it's testing and failure is a random process, statistics needs to come into play. But that's different to just getting a device that has spent the last 3 years in development, and here's your prototype, and now your reliability program starts when you start doing demonstration testing. That's different. That is just hoping that the reliability fairy is going to sprinkle reliability dust onto your machine.
Do you have a graphic for the? Do you have a graphic for the reliability fairy?
I most certainly do.
I thought so. Yeah, a little magic wand sprinkling dust. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
I got to get one of those. Yeah.
I'll share it with you after this. It is the ugliest fairy going around. It's also, of course, completely fictional.
Yeah.
So
So anyway, I mean, if from the title of this episode, or when typically we talk about some more technical stuff or culture stuff and everything else. So this one is, I think, critical, and it reminds me of a quote I heard from Wayne Nelson years and years ago. And I asked him about, what do you think about statistical confidence and this p-value and all the other stuff that goes with our stats stuff? And he's a statistician first and a reliability guy afterwards. And he goes, well, the words we use matter. So it's in context. So if somebody says, are you sure it's going to work? They're not asking for 90% confident that we're at least 90% reliable. They're asking for, are you, from an engineering judgment point of view, are you there? And the words we use matter. So confidence, like reliability, both have dictionary meanings that are completely different than the way we typically use them. And being conscious of that is critical. So anyway, I'm just thinking that, if you're listening to this and does it make sense or not, we'd love to hear from you. Are there other types of terms or features like this that you run into that create an issue or a problem? Or better yet, if you know of a way to build confidence in your program that you're going to actually create a highly reliable product that meets your customers' expectations, how did you do that? How did you get that confidence built within your organization? Chris outlined a couple of ideas here, but how have you actually made it happen? We'd love to hear those kinds of stories. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. You can leave us a voice message or you can write us a note. Chris and I and the other hosts of the show are available on LinkedIn or in our About pages. There's lots of ways to get in touch with us and to join the conversation. So we'd love to hear from you. So that, Chris, I think we can confidently wrap this episode up. No pun intended.
Well, not a pun. You're actually using the word, so I'm on board too.
Okay.
Always interested to see what other people think confidence means, and looking forward to the responses.
Yeah, no, that would be great. All right, thanks, Chris. Talk to you soon.
Cheers, mate. See ya.
Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.